Well, okay, the countdown with a little bit delay has turned to 0. So I would really like to welcome you very warmly from Zurich. My name is Oliver Bertschingham. I'm the president and acting managing director of the Chamber of Commerce Switzerland, Central Eastern Europe. I also would like to do that, this welcome in the name of the 11 organizations which are behind this. And you all know, the ones who have been here before, these are the 10 Swiss Central Eastern Europe country chambers of commerce, from the Baltics here, which is very relevant, all the way down to Macedonia and then Bulgaria. And yeah, we invented this format, CEE Swiss Impulse Session, as something like the TEDx talk of Central Eastern Europe, to provide people who are active in the intersection between Switzerland and CEE once a month with inspiring insights by great speakers in regards to relevant topics. Well, and I think today is a very good example of that. Of course, all chambers do a lot more to help, build thriving relationships between Switzerland and their country. So please check out what they are doing. You will receive all their contact details later. Well, before I will introduce Linnar, I just wanted to give you a couple of hints here. It will be something like a 30-minute speech, and then we have time for Q&A. Linnar has to go on to another meeting, so we need to end quite punctually. You are on mute and with no video. We will end on time and probably have maybe a couple of more minutes, but not much more. Use the chat function. For example, say hi to everybody and let them know where you're from or where you're at the moment. But use the Q&A button if you have questions, which we will then answer afterwards. You will receive the slides and you will receive all contact details of the Chambers of Commerce in our follow-up meeting. You can also rewatch the session on our YouTube channel. Good. Well, let me introduce Linnar. Well, Linnar Viik has a long experience as an IT scientist and IT visionary. In his career, the Estonian was an advisor at the United Nations Development Program, a counselor at Stockholm Environment Institute, and a founding member of the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. In 2002, he co-founded an e-governance academy in Estonia and was working there as a program director. During this time, he has been advising the most relevant actors and over 40 governments on the digital strategy, digital capacities, and digital transformation roadmaps. Today, Linnar is a visiting lecturer at the University of Tartu, Estonian Academy of Arts, and Tallinn University, as well as partner and member of the board of Mobi Solutions and chairman of the supervisory board of EIT Digital. Linnar Viik published over 120 articles and 10 reports, mostly on the topics of knowledge-based economy and the implications of information society. Very recently, he was nominated to be a member of the Digital Council of the President of Estonia, together with only 2 other renowned experts in the country. This happened in April, so we are very, very happy that Linnar will tell us so much about this exciting story of Estonia, and I hand it over to you, Linnar.
Thank you so much, and warm welcome also from Tallinn, and pleasure to be part of this session. I would like also to start sharing my screen, and I divide my presentation into 3 parts. One is related where we are, second, how we got there, and third, how we want to move ahead. And I hope you can see the screen. Where we are right now, Estonia is ranked currently in digital economy innovation indexes, including also openness and of speech, economy and entrepreneurship, relatively highly, and that has been not achieved overnight, but certainly it's something which is 20+ years work. Currently also Estonia is recognized as a so-called country of unicorns, Estonian-based digital unicorns or companies who have grown very quickly to the €1 billion plus valuation are 11 companies, and there is a certain and very clear logic how we got into that situation. On a global scenery, I think there are two things to mention perhaps about the current situation also. First of all, in order, when we look to the number of startups and scale-ups per capita, it's only Israel and Silicon Valley area which are similar to Estonia in terms of the number of startups per capita. And those unicorns are not just unicorns on the paper value, but when we are looking to the overall funding they have gathered, and we're talking about the global investors, then there is one ratio to keep in mind, that the total amount of investments for 2021, for example, by Estonian startup companies from the global investors was higher than the total accumulated R&D and higher education expenditure in the country. So if you try to put it to your context, you try to accumulate the higher education, R&D expenditure, and try to find any other country which is able to attract by startup and scale-up companies as much money as those budget accumulated. This is where we are and how we started. Well, this is a phone, famous phone from the Prime Minister's office when he regained its post after giving oath in front of the Estonian independent parliament, regaining the independence from Soviet Union. And honestly, we inherited the chaos and mess. No institutions, no infrastructure, no own structures and bureaucracy, no regulatory environment, no legislation. And when Prime Minister stepped to his office and there were 6 phones on the table and he asked, well, what is a red phone without any dial tuning here? Then the secretary had to say that, well, Mr. Prime Minister, we don't know. It was here when we regained our independence. And when somebody is calling to that number, you better pick up, then we know where it's connected to. So that was a situation. And that coincidence was that at the same time, when we regained our independence, there was also a shift in the global digital technology, a shift from the mainframe computers to local area networks and personal computing, also in regards to data communication, when the proprietary data communication protocols were switched over to something which was known as a TCP/IP, Open Communication Protocol, which we started use actively because it worked over the old Soviet copper infrastructure, and it was free of charge and it was open. Our first national IT budget was so small that when we went, based on the advice of some other governments, to speak to their biggest vendor, IBM, they congratulated, of course, us for becoming independent and wow, nice country, and here you go. But when they heard about our IT budget, they said that, well, you can look at our mainframe but not touch it. And when your budget is 100 times bigger a year, we can start talking about business. But we had an urgency. We had to run the country. And so the digitalization was also considered as a must. And therefore, we also started immediately using and utilizing PC-based architecture, TCP/IP, which nowadays is known as internet-based architecture, and that was really building up step by step the organizations to become digital, not only public but private. 5 years later, in 1996, we recognized the importance of delivering digital skills to everybody. And Tiger Leap Foundation was founded, and that is one of those characteristics of Estonia. Majority of the outcomes we have always achieved through private-public partnership. It was a private foundation where public universities, public government spending, but also private companies joined the forces to deliver internet and computers together with a curriculum to all schools. And it was achieved in 4 years' time. So by year 2000, all the schools were online. And since that, we have generated year after year digitally skilled graduates from all the schools in Estonia. In the same time, we also try to build up a process where not only the school children, but also a broader public was able to access internet, and something called Tiger Tour, an event taking place in August in 10 different cities in the public squares, where every day an internet for public use was built up for everybody, including the training for hundreds and hundreds of people every day. And within 1 week time, we increased email usage in a country for 20%. And that was public internet use also that followed that. So that was 1999, and also a few years later, when government moved in its new premises, it was decided that also government needs to start working in a new way. It was very clear that when everything was already prepared, digital, no typewriters, no nothing related to handwritten materials to cabinet meetings, we decided to digitize also the top of the iceberg. And that is a video from the very, very first Estonian government cabinet layout when the Estonian-made computers were introduced, and it was fully digital workflow made for government. It was not, and it is still not, a biggest expense point, of course, for the public expenditures, a cabinet meeting, but it serves in the same time as a example, and it serves also as something where you can see that government can also do in the highest level a digital transformation. In 2001, it was replacing those amounts of paper, and what you can see is agenda for 1 week of the cabinet meeting, very familiar to everybody who is working in public administration and government sector, where all the countries, all the governments currently are distributing and copying the cabinet agendas every week to not only cabinet members, but also ministries, president offices, state auditor's office, different county levels, and other state institutions. The return on the investment of that system was achieved by not copying the papers for 14 months. So the digital systems can have also very quick return on the investment. And right now we are living in the third, or I think even a fourth generation of that cabinet IT system. When first those computers were replaced with the laptops, then with tablets, and now bring your own device solutions. Cabinet members can participate wherever they are physically on the cabinet meetings. And that meant also that, for example, during the COVID period, we had already a long-standing practice of working remotely. So that was really something which could be described as how we got there, but how we got there had three pillars, three equally important pillars. We always recommend also other countries to observe and monitor on on a regular basis, because the definition of those pillars is changing also with the course of time and development of technology. First of all, everybody needs to have an opportunity to access digital technologies, either via public internet access points as we built, free Wi-Fi networks, very well encouraged competition on telecommunication services market, or other means you are able to build up. So the access to the digital technologies and internet needs to be in a focus in one hand. Second, if you have an access to the technology, you need also know how to use it. And skills is also having different layers. There are user skills, but there are skills also for developing the services, and also skills needed to maintain and administer existing services, to make them secure, to make them user-friendly and continuously develop. So the skill set is also something which is increasing and changing over the timeline, and it needs equally to be considered as important and as access, but also the third pillar, the services. And it's not only the government services, but most importantly, the encouragement of the private services. And once again, the need to understand that big amount of local private services are based on the strong interaction with government services or databases or data accessible or generated within the public sector. So the services you are using your skills and having an access to digital technologies are something which will equally have a balance throughout all society, and there are services to different user groups which are extremely important for them, and there are quite a big number of the different skills needed to those different user groups, and also the way how we built up the access to digital technologies needs to be considered a different one for different groups. And when defining the role of the leaders, it's not so much about creating the vision. Estonia is one of the few countries which long time did not have any government minister for the digitalization. We rather consider that it's important that every minister is a digital leader. Every CAO in private sector needs also to be a digital champion. And it's a bit weird to look that Estonian e-strategy or digital transformation strategies are usually rather a set of principles, not a fat papers of hundreds of pages, but rather a set of principles, commonly accepted principles, both by private and public sector, which can fit to maximum 5 pages. And we consider that when we have a common vision and the grounding principles in place, then the leaders are responsible for translating those principles and, most importantly, vision into action, into an inclusive action, where all the organizations are part of making things happen. And the anecdotal evidence always is that governments don't want to innovate because if you fail, you can't do it again. And it's a paradox, because if you want to really to innovate and do something you have never done before, it's highly probable that you fail. But you don't need to fail in a big amount. You need to try and fail in a small amounts and learn from those failures and publicly admit that we are trying another way we are trying further. And this is something which we feel very strongly is underlying the acceptance of society, where they want government and want private sector to try to be different, to try to be better, because people want government not to be as it used to be, but to be better than it ever was. And it's built into that concept that governments, while trying to be innovative, sometimes fail. That government and digital society is like human being who is always a little bit ill, but we have internal functions, we have our internal organs to help us to cope with different external forms of bacteria or viruses, and we know how to heal ourselves. Also, government is capable, or digital society needs to be constantly aware of its situation and find the best ways and solutions to heal yourself. One of the cornerstones, which I did not mention for Estonia, has been digital identity. And this is something which we consider as absolute human right. We know that one of the core human rights is a right to identity. Every human being on planet Earth has a right to be identified and recognized by its identity. Whether you are Michael Smith or whether you are Linnar Viik, you have a publicly recognized and government recognized identity, which you can use and utilize, and not only in private communication, but also in the business, to international travel, and everybody accepts your identity. But in digital world, where roughly around 5 billion people spend its time every day, only a tiny fraction of people, of the global internet users, can be recognized based on the truly recognized and accepted digital identity. In 2002, when we started the digital identity, this was really the understanding that in the nearby future and already in the present in 2002, we needed to identify ourselves throughout the online interactions, whether it is a bank, whether it is insurance, whether it is any utility services or any digital commerce, but also any digital public service. You need to have a common, recognized and accepted digital identity, which originally was on a smart card based like plastic piece of paper, including a small chip on that. And that evolved into a mobile ID and smart ID, which are all the same forms of digital identity, but you can use and utilize in a different format and way. That is also something which gives us opportunity to digitize all the services and all the interactions, including also voting in the parliament, local elections or European Parliament elections, or expressing any will you want. Based on that, we can also say that there are 3 core sets of data which are the fundamentals for any interaction you can imagine taking place in any society. One is an understanding of a population and the digital identity of that population. Every human being needs to be identified or recognized, and it's the human right to be recognized online as who they are, and you need to have a technological tools to prove that. So population registry, because people are part of what any government, any business wants to have to be recognized, but also every government has a responsibility over. Second part is a land which is owned by any institution, private persons, government, and the land registry needs also to be there. And finally, the business registry, including also NGOs and any other forms of legal entities. They are made by people, they are made by other businesses or legal entities, and they are the ones who own the land together with the people based on the population registry. On the land, you may have different infrastructures. On the land, you may have different houses, restrictions, provisions. All the cars you are using are owned by either people or businesses. All the services you are building are around those three core sets of data. And those three cores of data need only not to be accurate, but also to be openly accessible and interoperable with other registries and other service providers. In Estonia, for that, we have created something which we call X-Road, a digital information exchange, which is strongly secure. And our focus is securing the data, not the infrastructure. The data is something which needs to be strongly encrypted, and role-based access, meaning that not everybody can access any field of data, but only when you have identified yourself digitally, you have a certain role. Me as a father have a unique access to my children's health data or education data. Me as a chairman have a unique access to only certain companies' data. Me as a person owning a piece of land and a house have unique access to the data of my ownership. And that approach has saved us not only many years, but has becoming busiest highway in Estonian digital data interchange. Very briefly also about the timeline. It sometimes has a feeling that things happen overnight, but no, it is a gradual evolutionary process, starting, for example, with different public services like tax department digital services, or mobile parking, which was starting in 2000, the different data interchanges. All the Estonian children have digital school environment where the registrars themselves have their marks, examinations, and homeworks. Also on land registry, education registry, digital voting, and those are built year after year, not all at once. Also respecting and accepting the fact what is a acceptance level of society and what is a potential takeoff of different services. Right now we are moving into using and utilizing an approach called invisible or seamless digital government, which means that you don't need to apply for the service. If you are entitled to certain service, you will be provided. And you can later on reject of that service. For example, when my driver's license expires, government is not, well, 10 years ago, Estonian government tend to send me reminders that your driver's license is about to expire, sending me an SMS, sending me an email. Now, government is no longer sending me an email reminders, but when all my health data is correct, and when they know my address, which they know, they will just send me a new driver's license, and that's it. And if I'm not happy with the picture which government used based on the public registries of visual identity on my driver's license, I can say that, well, I'm not happy with that, but, well, let me take a new picture of myself and I will need a new driver's license, which sometimes is a case also. So invisible services or seamless services certainly the next layer. And to conclude my presentation with a couple of ways to look forward, we recognize very clearly that PC-based and internet-driven architecture with distributed databases, strong digital encryption and identity took us where we are right now. But what do we need to have in our hands to move forward? This is the question we have. And we don't know really the answer, but we are trying to figure it out by day work. However, I would like just to highlight 5 very important trends which are not only making a huge impact on Estonia, but I think to the most countries around the world, while they are moving ahead to the next generation of digital society in front of them. One is something which we know as information explosion. The amount of information generated by different sensors, by different computer networks, and also tiny fraction information generated by human beings is growing exponentially. However, there is a big gap, and the gap is no longer who have an access to internet or who has an access to information, but the biggest gap is who has capacity to make a sense out of that data, who can translate and has a capacity to transform the core data into a meaningful knowledge. So the capacity to analyze the data is not growing as quickly as amount of data. It's going only linearly, and another aspect we see, it is more and more concentrated. There is a fistful of global companies who have obtained the certain standards at present to analyze the data. And governments need to have, and societies need to, first of all, to be aware of that the data analyzing capacity is mostly out of your jurisdiction. You can partner with them, you can make deals with them, but they are not your jurisdiction-based entities. The second part of the learning and understanding, of course, is how to generate the local capacities. And the local capacities development for analyzing the data and putting it to the local context is not possible by government alone, not possible by private sector alone, not possible by universities, but you need something which is called triple helix approach, where there is a strong partnership between research, universities, private sector, and also public sector. Second trend I would like to emphasize is something which we know, something which I describe here in the chart as a number of transistors available for data processing. And out of that chart, you can see that we are only starting the growth. Everything we knew as a core infrastructure and core technological architectural platform in 2009 or even 2015 is becoming obsolete in front of the computing capacity and computing power we have. So computing power is no longer a restriction, but the restriction becomes different. Those data processing systems are becoming more and more complex, and that complexity needs a very different approach to manage the process. Our third trend, which we are observing, could be maybe described with that picture taken in the Vatican on 2005 and 2013, respectively. Same place, similar location, and the same event. People are waiting a white smoke to come out from the chimney, but something has changed. Something is different on the picture. And nobody was able to predict in 2005, not even in 2009, not even in 2010, that the picture in 2013 with people being equipped with a personal digital capacity is expanding so quickly. So there is something we inevitably have built into our digital future is uncertainty, or we don't know what will be the next digital platform, what it looks like. And we need just to be ready and build something which in a sense can't be future proof, because we don't know what the future looks like. But there are certain elements and the core elements which enable us to move towards that future of uncertainty. And the most important part is related to be in small cyclical events, recognizing the big trends which are going to impact our society. Fourth pillar is related about user experience, and user experience is no longer defined by laws, regulations, and decrees of government. But the user experience is defined by private companies, and governments either need to cope with the standards and principles of user experience delivered by private companies, or pray that there still are some people left who are accepting the government. So people want, and they don't understand why government can't act like Spotify, why government can't act like Airbnb or Uber, why the public transportation is not equipped already with a location-sensitive sensors sharing with me my best route to my mobile device in a similar and even better user experience as to Uber or Bolt. And actually governments don't have a good response to that, because they could, but they don't just think it's important, but it is important. And the final thing which is impacting us everybody is a level of technological advances related to digitalization of industrial processes and all the sectors of economy, transport, logistics, industrial manufacturing, also design of industrial manufacturing and service industry. And that means that we will have a big shifts taking place in near real time on employment market. This picture is part of the recent European Union presidency, where together with McKinsey consultancy, the analytics of jobs vulnerability was taken into account and into a radar screen of policymakers all around Europe. We can't say that there is any country in Europe where people continue in 2030 their current job. This is an understanding that by 2030, at least 50% of all the jobs in an employment market currently will be at least to an not radical way, but at least in a moderate way be redefined. And there are new skills and new jobs which are going to replace those present jobs and functions in the employment market, which are emerging. And honestly, societies are not ready, governments are not ready, and in many cases also businesses are not ready. But this is one of the most important trends we try to keep on our radar screen. And with that, I would like also to conclude my presentation. Estonia's response to the question to E or not to E has been to E, but we ask, or we reconfirm that to E, not once, but every day. And well, from the Nordic people, we always have a joke that well, the true Scandinavian or Nordic man only once says to the wife that I love you, because you said that I love you, and well, unless the status have not been somehow reshifted, you don't need to repeat that sentence any longer. We speak little and we don't want to repeat ourselves. But in order to succeed with your personal life and also with your love life, you need to repeat to your loved ones that you love them. And we have also learned that in order to be successful in digitalization, you need continuously to repeat, yes, 2E, 2E, and 2E. And this is something I would like to stop my presentation today as well. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Linnar, for this super presentation. Really, really cool. When I look at your agenda, that I when I think of what we have achieved in Switzerland, of the points that you kind of like started in 2002, yeah, maybe we have those, but I guess I invite everybody to write your question in the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. Well, maybe to kick off this round, I think always that data laws are a bit the way actually like countries like Switzerland or Germany are interpreting the value of data secrecy, is basically a big stopping block for all kinds of innovation in regards to digitization as well. Because I think fundamentally, excuse me, the setup of our data laws seems to be different. And maybe you can elaborate a bit on this when you consult governments.
I agree that, well, in addition to, well, let me put it in a nutshell. Roughly around 200 governments around the world have pretty similar goals in regards to their efforts towards digitalization. Aruba and Barbados in Caribbean have the same goals as Japan or Malaysia or as Switzerland, or to a certain degree also as China. So the utilization of the digital technologies in private and public sector and regulatory framework around them is something which governments have understood it's important. However, the roadmaps to them, to those goals, towards those goals, depend nowadays more and more on something which we may call a social and cultural and legacy factors. But social and cultural factors are extremely important. And well, we can't do anything about that except becoming more and more role models and showcases. However, there is something which is embedded very deeply into the DNA of society, like the fact that in European Union, only 2 countries would never accept the ID code for citizens, and one of them is Germany, and second is Hungary. And there is a historic legacy related to that, and in order to overcome that, you need to make an enormous amount of work, really, with the generations which are growing on top of. Because alternatives for the not approaching digital identity or the access to data or sharing the data in a modern sense is that you are not only stopping the opportunities for innovation and service provisioning on your national level, but you transform your businesses into other jurisdictions where there is an opportunity to provide that service in a better way. And therefore, the ways how to address regulatory environments needs to be crafted very carefully. GDPR, which is a European approach or European Union approach to data protection, is fair, but certainly restrictive towards number of innovations. Estonia has had before GDPR also own data protection acts, which are to a certain degree even more stricter because they deal with stronger encryption and role-based access to the data. And now European law and regulatory framework is a bit different approach, which in my mind has not been helping our European companies or governments to start providing better services for citizens or businesses. And when we're looking now to the next regulatory framework, which is emerging regulatory framework for artificial intelligence, I see the similar trends where Europe is not trying to be one of the players next to China or United States with artificial intelligence, but they are accepting in a sense the fact that we are a museum of history and heritage, and we accept the fact that we are not in that game any longer. So this is very bluntly to put it, but I would always love European regulatory framework to be more encouraging towards an innovation, but I also am a realist and understand the circumstances of difficulty to come out with a compromise that is acceptable for all the members.
Okay, so well, as usual, we like to stop at this at the 1:45. This is officially, but we have like 1 or 2 minutes where we have 2 questions coming from the audience.
I will pick one. I will pick the one question which is about the focus and cost of digitalization. When we have always in Estonia looked how much money OECD countries have for digitalization. So my answer is twofold. First of all, in order to provide better health services, you don't need more money for the health services, but you need more digitally prepared and well orchestrated process for the health services. So IT budget for the healthcare is not just IT budget for the healthcare, but it's for better health services, which is giving you an opportunity to deliver more with less. And when public institutions are forced for the cooperation in between each other, but also with the private sector, you are able actually to deliver digital solutions in a fraction of the cost. And I would just, my last example of today is how much costs digital government or digital society for average Estonian. And the answer is it costs as much as Spotify subscription. And all the digital services are accessible. 100% of the services, except Mering right now. But the rest, well, and the Mering is also, well, you can make your Mering, well, and you can make your application, but you need finally to be there for the marriage and also for divorce. The rest of the services, including the birth to death, are all digital. And when we say that, well, in Estonia, you get your digital government for 1 Spotify subscription per month per citizen. Then in Finland, for example, in our Nordic neighbor, you need to pay 5 times more to get the same Spotify or e-government. And your playlist is much smaller. You get only half of the music which you have in Estonia for paying 5 times more. If you go to Canada, you need to pay 10 times more for the same Spotify, and your playlist is only 20% of those of the songs you can hear in Estonia. I know this is a bad analogy, but Estonia is a so-called poorest advanced digital society, or cheapest digital society, but we like to call it the most efficient digital society per capita, per dollar right now on planet Earth. But with that, I would like to thank you, everybody, and move to my next session.
So, Linnar, thanks a lot for this very comprehensive input. Just the last question with yes or no for you, was there just one person in Estonia that pushed, or was it that you
No,
could...
it can't be something that one person does. It needs to be inclusive leadership and shared leadership.
Yeah.
And that means that we have never had a single political party or single prime minister or single president who has been an advocate for the one leader, but we have always had a continuity. So digital agenda is part of all businesses, all political parties, and every government.
Thanks, Linnar, for this as well. So I leave you. I just wanted to thank again and also mention that in our next session to the audience, we will talk about something where Switzerland is quite good at. I don't really want to know what our Spotify cost example would be for Switzerland. Maybe you can calculate that once, but our next session will be on the 26th of June. It will be about innovation. The question will be how to be the most innovative country in the world, which Switzerland often is stated as. And we have a great speaker again, Raymond Krohn. He's the CEO of Switzerland Innovation, which is the umbrella organization of the 6 innovation parks in Switzerland. He will talk about what it takes and what Switzerland to become the most innovative country and how Switzerland innovation is contributing. Again, on the 26th of June, I wish everybody a great day and hope to see you again. Bye-bye.